ports management system. I'm joined by Mr. Emmanuel Iheanacho, who is a former Minister of Interior. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, it's interesting. Port, of course, a major avenue of revenue generation for the government, and any government in the world would like to see it work perfectly. But of course, you have this matter which a whole lot of people seem to be concerned about, which is the security of the ports. And we know the relationship between capital and security. If it's insecure, it flees. But this private handling of the ports, I mean, I know you must have heard about it being handed to quote-unquote a former militant. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am not entirely sure that that statement is correct, that the ports have been handed over to a former militant. I know that the ports management and administration is firmly under the control of the Nigerian Ports Authority. So talking about security in the ports, of course, is very important that we have a port system that is fully secure, that people have confidence in. Nigerian economy is dependent on international trade, and international trade depends a whole lot on traffic through the port. So we really need to have a very secure and safe port system if our economy is to grow and prosper.
Okay, so, but at the moment, I mean, pardon me for butting in there, the ports, the way they operate and the traffic, it seems lopsided. Not all the ports attract the same kind of traffic. And not that it's impossible. Is it impossible for them to attract almost equal amount of traffic?
Well, it really depends on the administrative measures that you put in place. One of the changes that we advocated historically in order to have a full utilization of all the ports along the coast is to grant autonomy to port management in all the different ports, so that people would be at liberty to use the pricing mechanism to attract people to certain ports that people would rather not go to. But if we have a unitary management system and a unitary pricing policy, then people seem to choose one particular port and everybody goes there. But if we had a discussion, for instance, where port managers in Port Harcourt, port managers in Calabar would look at the rate of utilization and be able to set their prices so that this would attract people to come to their ports, then this would be a very good way of ensuring an even distribution of business through all the port system. Well, it was tried at that time. You know, there was a decentralization, and after some time they went back again.
Why?
I have no idea. This is the way things seem to happen here. But I really still say that it would be a great idea if we had a considerable autonomy in terms of the discretion of port managers to develop policies that would generate a greater throughput of cargo through their own ports.
Well, you know, if they're autonomous, would they also depend on would they still depend on the federal government to help build infrastructure at the ports?
Well, I mean, I don't really know why they would like to depend on the federal government to build infrastructure at the ports. If there is a demand for port services from any port, all you have to do is to conceive of a business plan, a bankable business plan, and you take it to financiers, and then the whole thing kicks into place.
So, for instance, things like dredging to enable motherships coming to the ports will be the responsibility of those who take care of the ports?
Certainly. I mean, if you dredge to allow big ships coming to the ports, then you have to charge a premium for people who use the ports. So it isn't a question that you dredge and then people will use it for free. If somebody believes that deeper waters would enhance the cost of their business, then they will be willing to pay for it. So we should really get out of this mindset where we fall back to the government all the time and ask the government to provide this and provide that. Businessmen can see an opportunity in providing dredging services, knowing fully well that there are people who are willing to pay to use those services. This is the way to go.
You know, I actually read you two interviews back-to-back on Sunday, this day, as well as The Guardian. You actually said loads of stuff about the ports. But one thing comes to mind: how can the government make more money, or how can the nation make more money through better management of our ports?
Well, we can make more money through better management by ensuring that we have an efficient system for managing traffic through the ports. One of the problems that we have had in the ports is that the ports, the last major investments in ports, let's use Lagos as an example, would be at least 30 years ago. And in that time, population is increasing, the size of business traffic through the ports is increasing. The nature of the cargo throughput is actually much more different from what we had years ago. Now we have goods that are traveling in containers rather than having a regular big bulk cargo. All of these things really need to be factored in our planning so that we plan ahead. Plan in terms of additional volumes, plan in terms of facilities that would serve the hinterland of the ports. But if we don't do these things, we then see the problem that we have where everybody's complaining about traffic congestion in the approaches to the ports. The ports are dying. The ports in Lagos are absolutely dying. But what are we going to do about it?
Sorry, when you said the ports are dying, is that something that's currently happening?
Well, it's been happening over time.
No, because recently we've heard about moves to revive the ports, and that there's been remarkable progress being made in recent times. Is that true?
But what I would like to say is when you talk about moves to revive the ports or to revive anything, you don't have to wait until something is dying and then you go up and say we're going to revive it. You have to really be able to plan, to project, to say this is volume traffic that we have been seeing year on year, and this is what we project for the next 10 years. And you start planning now for the facilities that will handle that traffic. You don't wait until the ports absolutely grind to a halt. Well, and that is what we're seeing, because I was going to say that if you took a trip to Creek Road, for instance, you'll find that one road, the one that leads all the way to the port, is absolutely chock-up with container traffic. Yeah. And ordinary users of the port can no longer have access. The same thing happens if you went to Tinkan. We shouldn't allow that to happen. For instance, somebody would have observed that years ago, most of the businesses along Creek Road, for instance, are falling into obsolescence. Is it not possible that we could actually buy up all that real estate and absolutely knock down all those buildings where the businesses are no longer viable and develop that as additional marshalling area for the ports?
Have they considered that proposition?
Well, I'm just saying that. The other thing that I was going to say, opposite the ports in Apapa, there is one great big island that's there. Nobody is using it. And squatters are absolutely moving in there and they're building substantial structures. Is it not possible, because that area is served with deep water approaches, that we can actually develop a port on that side and have a system where we have barges and pontoons? Dead at night when there's no traffic, you move those containers across to the mainland, and then we have a way of managing an efficient system of moving goods back and forth. But nobody thinks about these things. But I think we should be thinking about all of these necessary changes.
Well, recently, the coordinating minister of the economy, she raised concerns about the turnaround times at the port, how long it takes to clear goods, and the fact that it was too slow. So recently we heard that improvements had been made in that particular sector, and that the ports were being made to work 24 hours a day, 24 hours in the day, something that hadn't been done since the Civil War. And we're just wondering, is this a step in the right direction, or are we stressing our infrastructure?
Well, I mean, certainly if they have empaneled a committee to look at the problems in the ports, and if that committee has made recommendations that has brought some improvements, it's certainly better than the period before the empaneling of the committee. But what I'm saying is that we shouldn't really be taking knee-jerk actions. The port is really choked and congested. Set up a committee. Committee makes a recommendation. One or two things are put in place. We then go back again. Another 2 or 3 years, we repeat the process. What I'm saying is that we have to have a system that is continuous, where we continue to evaluate the size of the trade, the structure of the trade, the optimal requirements in terms of facilities, and continue to make provisions for all of those things.
Amazing. But we have to put this question in. I mean, much as we've got challenges with the port operations and administration, which of course it can be better, the roads along that area defied almost all logic and sometimes all headlines, and it remains that way. What is the biggest problem with fixing the roads at the port?
There's nothing wrong with the roads. It's just that there is a lack of investment in roads. If you have roads that were built maybe 20, 30 years ago, and the size of the trade has maybe doubled or tripled, and the structure of the trade has changed, and you are expecting that those roads will continue to serve you, then you really would be you really would not be facing reality. You have to build more roads, you have to build wider roads, you have to continue to maintain them. But when you look at the road that runs outside Tinkan all the way to the ports, it's horrible. Money hasn't been spent there, not for repairing or maintaining, not to talk about building new roads. These are the problems that we are talking about. The ports are very important to our economy. They are gateways to the Nigerian economy. The ports have got to be maintained.
Yeah, but how come money has not been spent on those roads?
Why do you mean how come money has not been spent? Money has not been spent. Money has to be spent. Someone has to conceive of the idea that this infrastructure is currently inadequate in relation to what would be optimal.
Is it political that they want to fix the road?
I don't see how it could be political. I mean, the government could not really want a situation where the ports would not function. It is the case that this thing is something that has been built up over a long period of time, and it might well be the case that the government currently is working very hard to try and do something about it. Certainly, I know that this administration is not taking its responsibility in that regard lightly at all. I know that a lot of programs are being conceived at this point in time to address some of these infrastructure deficit issues.
Because we know that government's got the master plan for that road. They have the plan that Shagari had at the time where you don't have to use that road, go through the outskirts. So they have all this plan, because we always go crazy with comments, response from people who were on that road who spend 4 hours, 5 hours on a regular basis. Time is money and time is spent. So if they lose all the time there, government loses money.
I agree with you entirely. You talked about a master plan that was developed in Shagari's time, and I'm talking about a dynamic process that continues to look at what you have,
always improve on it,
what is happening, what is the size of the trade. Shagari's plan would have been good when Shagari was there, but Shagari's plan would not be adequate for what we have on ground today. So I think that we have to develop a dynamic planning process that really takes into account the requirement for us to project into the future in terms of the size of the trade that has to go through the ports, in terms of the nature of facilities that we require. Take intermodalism, for instance. That is the key thing that integrates sea, rail, and road transport. When you go down to Apapa Port again, and we use it as an example, I grew up in that area incidentally, and you stand on the bridge and you have a look towards the port, and you see the rail station that has been absolutely obsolete for the past 30 years. And you wonder why that road, all those obsolete infrastructure has not been pulled out and new infrastructure built to the ports. So now we can be evacuating cargo from the ports using rail transports. We can even be evacuating oil from the port using rail transport.
You know, now you just mentioned...
That will create greater efficiency in terms of how goods are transported internally.
Apapa Port brings to mind, Mr. Bochin, Apapa Port brings to mind this question: how wrong can we be when we keep talking about ports and we just think about Lagos and only Lagos? Is that the only port we have?
That also is a very good idea, because, you know, we have about 803 kilometers of a coastline.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you really go and look around, you could see other places where you could actually develop additional ports.
So why
and I think
we
that
done
those
that?
are actually been that possibility is being looked at this point in time. Okay. I know that the Honorable Minister of Transport did set up a committee that was charged with responsibility for identifying areas, particularly inland river locations where additional ports could be developed. And I think that when this plan comes to fruition, we are going to see a greater improvement.
If you were to give some kind of suggestions to the government, which other ports would you want to see developed?
There are lots and lots of places where ports could be developed. In the riverine states, in Bayelsa, in River State, in Cross River State, in Akwa Ibom State. And I think what really needs to be done is that we conceive of a plan to increase the number of ports, so that the congestion that we see in Lagos and the extraordinary costs that are borne by those who consume the goods that come through the ports.
Can we get anyone around the eastern states, for instance, Anambra?
I don't know how you can get it. I know that there is a port being developed in Onitsha, but the problem that you have is, of course, that means you have to navigate through the River Niger, and there's a major problems of siltation in the River Niger all the time, and the size of the vessels that you could get up there. So it could well be the case that if you develop the port in Onitsha, then you will be restricted to having a barge traffic rather than having big ships making a transit to that port. But all of those things take planning, you know. When I left a public office, I traveled a lot, and I went to America. And every time I went to America, I went to the southern states, and I overflew the southern states. And it was incredible to see the extent to which they had used their riverine locations, particularly the Delta. Everything that you saw there, oil facilities, tanks for storing sulfur, barge traffic, it was absolutely phenomenal. If we needed to see a model of what we should be doing with our coastal locations, we should go to the south of the United States and have a look.
You know, there are many people who are passionate about the port. One of them is Mr. Olisa Agbakuba, and he's always said that, you know, if he's given leeway, he could raise about 7 trillion naira from the ports yearly. From what exactly do you think he's looking at raising this money from?
Where Olisa would get his 7 trillion from?
Yes, that we're not looking at presently.
Well, I don't know if he intends to build a mint in the ports. I have no idea. Olisa is a friend of mine. I suppose, on a serious note, what he is saying that a lot of money could be raised from the ports if we run an efficient port system. And I agree with him entirely that is the case.
What about local content in the ports as a stand presently? I mean, there's also been the complaint that a lot of Nigerians are not involved in the port business. Would you say that that is the case, and what exactly is responsible for this?
I really don't think that would be correct if you said that lots of Nigerians are not involved in the provision of services in the ports.
Or that they're not getting what brings in the major money, in the major services.
I really don't know. I mean, you have Nigerians who own terminals, but when it comes to the major shipping businesses, for instance, the Maersk's of this world, the Grimaldis of this world, well, you see, these are big businesses, and the major constraint would be finance, would be technical capacity, and so you have those areas dominated by Europeans. But what I think should really happen is that as an extension of the Nigerian content law and policy, we would make the granting of concessions to these people contingent upon their partnering with Nigerians. And when I mean partnering in a meaningful way, that will result in the transfer of technology and capacity to those Nigerians. Not partnering in the sense that, well, you're on the board and you get so much money on an annual basis and you are working there, but partnering in the sense that if you work there for about 5 years in management, you then would be able to generate a feasibility proposal that would put you in a position to be able to do what your former company had done. So I don't think that we have a major issue there. We really have to pursue the provisions of the Nigerian content policy in regard to how concessions are granted to ensure that Nigerians participate. One area that one has also talked about is in the shipping sector. You know, I have been involved with Olisa Agbakuba for so many years in pioneering the cabotage concept. We actually introduced that concept, and we fought very hard to explain to people what cabotage was. It's not a new concept at all. Most maritime countries in the world maintain discriminatory laws that reserve the movement of goods in their coastlines for their own nationals.
And to protect their economy.
And to protect their economy. The Americans, of course, being the major country that really and truly pursues these policies. We should do the same. We initiated the cabotage thing more than 20 years ago, I would say, and up till now we still have a situation where lots and lots of vessels owned by foreign interests are sitting outside our shores and prospecting for businesses, and Nigerian companies continue to cry to say we would like a piece of that action. I don't think that should be happening at this point in time.
Do you think government is willing to hands-off administration of the ports?
Well, when you say hands-off, government has to have a role.
But not controlling role.
Well, no, not controlling road, and that's why government actually decided on the policy of concessioning terminals to different people. So government then becomes a landlord.
How safe can that be if you tie that to security?
Pardon?
How safe can that be when you tie it to security?
That's what I was going to say. You see that apart from the commercial considerations, you have the security considerations. So whatever is happening in those terminals, whatever goods are being brought in through those terminals, government should be in a position to absolutely know that this thing is not going to result in an adverse security issue for the country.
In conclusion, sorry, I know that we're already been wound up. Are you satisfied? I know that the last time you were here, you spoke on fuel subsidy matter and how you were for the removal of fuel subsidy. Are you satisfied with the way things have gone so far so good?
Well, I'm glad that we are all witnesses to what happened. In the beginning, there was a lot of resistance to the subsidy business, but now people understand that the subsidy is absolutely wasted. You know, everybody now understands that the government was absolutely right in trying to remove the subsidies. Every forum that I have been to since that time, even the labor people are saying, well, of course we know that we must deregulate the industry. There you go. We don't want to continue to throw good money down the drain. We have the subsidy in place because we want it to benefit the common man. And the last time I told you that it didn't benefit them because they never have the capacity to actually go into a filling station to go and buy fuel. What we really should do actually, when people say remove the subsidy, it's not as if we're removing something from the economy and throwing it out. It's take investment from one area where it's been inefficiently used and reinvest it in a way that goes straight into the pockets of the common Nigerians. That is what we would like to see.
Well, while you attended FEC meeting, was there any time that these roads, the ports, was discussed at any time?
Do you know, I'm not at liberty to tell you that. I couldn't tell you that, could I? I couldn't tell you about anything that was discussed in the...
Now this is in terms of policy and development.
No, I couldn't tell you what was discussed in the Federal Executive Council. You could ask me questions.
No, but we have briefings regularly from what we discuss in FEC meetings.
Well, then, of course, that's the official briefings that you get. And I'm not at liberty to provide those briefings on camera. Thank you.